Warning. The following podcast contains spoilers for the film discussed, as well as strong language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, Internet, and welcome to How Have We Not Seen? I am Nate.
I am Juliet.
I'm Mitch.
And today we are watching Loving Vincent, which is Mitch's pick.
Yeah, it is.
I'm so excited.
Alright then, Mitch, I believe it is your turn to ask.
How have you guys not seen this movie?
I thought my dad was going to watch this movie with me, but we never got around to it, so I just waited, hoping that we would, but we never did.
And I had never even heard of it until you mentioned it to me.
I think you'll like it, honestly. Like both of you.
Yay!
Alright then, so,
Mitch, you want to ask the second question?
Right. So guys, what do you guys think this movie's about? What are your expectations?
I'm expecting a heartfelt, most likely not very historically accurate, beautifully animated telling of Vincent van Gogh's story.
Mm-hmm.
The animation, are you sure this is actually, like, just pure oil paintings?
This entire movie is pure oil on canvas.
And
Cool.
they animated the entire movie that way.
The entire gosh dang movie. I'm gonna give some interesting facts about the production after we watch it, because the whole thing is fascinating, at least to me.
It looks fascinating. Like, when we watched the trailer, it made me hyped for what they were going to be able to do animating these oil canvases.
Yeah, I'm super glad we're doing this movie because
Me
I
too.
remember one of my friends, I showed her the trailer when it first came out and she's like, oh, I can't watch this. I got a headache from it. And I'm like, oh wow, that sucks. And I was really hoping neither of you had that.
None of us did, so thankfully we can have this episode.
Or they're lying and they're masochists.
You decide!
Choose
My
your own
eyesight is
adventure.
superior. I will endure.
I have leg glasses. Alright, I'm expecting to be deeply moved by this movie. I'm expecting to be blown away at what they were able to do with Vincent van Gogh's paintings. And I'm also expecting to be heartbroken and to be terribly sad because, you know, Vincent van Gogh...
Was literally heartbroken. You got shot
Yeah.
in the chest.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not what I was going for! But,
Oh.
wow. But I'm expected to be heartbroken because we've all seen the clip from Doctor Who.
No.
Okay, you've seen the clip from Doctor Who, right, Mitch?
A little bit.
Okay, we'll show it to you after this movie because I have a feeling it's going to have a much bigger impact. But I always got the sense from what I read about Van Gogh that he never had a happy life and never knew how much he was loved. And every time I see characters like that in movies, my heart just goes out to them. So I'm expecting this to be very bittersweet, but hopefully uplifting with some positivity at the end.
Yeah, I guess I could say I'm expecting much the same.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what my thoughts are going to be on the animation. Maybe it's going to be really good, or maybe I'm going to find a derivative for some reason.
Ooh.
I mean, it's literally done in the style of Van Gogh. I'm like, on one hand, that could be really awesome. On the other hand, it might just be...
It could be very hit or miss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was nominated for Best Animated Film at the Oscars one year.
Oh, yeah.
I don't trust the Oscars animated categories. They are notoriously shitty when it comes to animated movies.
Well,
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in terms of picking who's gonna win, or...
Yep.
Well, this one didn't win.
I mean, Coco won, which was great in my
Coco
opinion.
was a good movie.
But there were also some really good animated movies that came out
Yes.
that year that got snubbed hard.
What were there?
Oh, I forgot the name of it. There was something that really caught my attention. Wait, didn't this movie literally lose to Coco?
Yes.
And then, like, not only that, like, it's just Disney movies in general tend to win at the Oscars when it comes to animated movies.
I mean, yeah, they do basically have a monopoly on this kind of stuff.
They
Oh,
do.
no. There are plenty of other people who make animated movies. It's just that Disney is the one who's, you know, has his feelers the most throughout Hollywood, so they can,
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I cannot wait until we get into our Disney episodes for Nate. It's gonna be fun.
But for now,
Yes.
I'm going to tear those movies apart when you get me the chance.
I'm excited, though, because when we get to that, you know, you don't have the rose-tinted glasses of childhood, which is, like, similar to another podcast I listened to where this guy reads the Harry Potter books for the first time as a 26-year-old man. So I'm interested to see what your critiques are going to be. I have a feeling I'm going to agree with most of them and disagree with most of them. But anyway, that's
How can you agree and disagree with most of them? That's mutually...
I might agree with one, but I might disagree with another.
Alright, you phrased it better the second time.
Yeah, that was better the second time. But we're not gonna do that because today we're gonna watch
Loving Vincent.
We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we will review Loving Vincent.
See you shortly, guys.
On the other side.
Wish them luck.
Oh boy.
And we're back. We just came back from watching Loving Vincent, and what do y'all think?
You first, Nate.
Wow. That was my first initial reaction, like, holy moly, you weren't kidding about how gorgeous the animation for this is. Like, I was worried that it was going to be derivative, so to say, but no, this was fantastic artwork. Like, the way the oil flows as they're, like, doing, like, just, like, the movement of nature and the movement of characters, like, the way it manages to emulate a lot of Vincent van Gogh's art style is astonishing. And, like the actual plot line, it's by the book. You know, it does a good job. It goes into the mind of Vincent van Gogh, and it brings up, yeah, it's entirely possible he got shot. It was, and, like, the circumstances of his death were pretty sus.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I know I didn't watch this movie for the writing. You know, I wanted to see gorgeous oil painting animation, and I was not disappointed. Like, it was kind of weird just how lifelike some of the characters' faces looked. Like, especially Armand's face. It was just kind of weird. But overall, yes, the animation was fantastic. Juliet?
I loved the animation in this movie. I agree with both of you. What I loved about it was, even when you got used to the animation style and you were still immersed in the world, it found some ways to take you by surprise. There'd be maybe like a glint of a certain color of paint here, or you could see the brush strokes move in the background. It found little ways to make you remember that this was hand-painted by all these extraordinary artists, and you think, this isn't just a movie, this is a piece of art I am watching, and that we have the privilege to watch. And it's like, this artwork won't go uncredited when they die, so it's beautiful to be witness to. I will agree with Nate that the story comes secondary to the animation, but the story does keep you engaged. It keeps you interested. You're very much following Armand along for the journey, wanting to find out what happened. And I like how at the end, after everything that's gone through, you really, like, when they have Vincent's last letter that he ever wrote, you really understood that this man had a beautiful soul and wanted to depict that with his paintings. I will say, you know, the only person who knows what happened to Van Gogh is Van Gogh. No one will ever know what really happened in the field, so...
And if someone did shoot him, the guy who shot him would also be the person who knew.
Yeah, well, 1 to 2 people would know. But we'll never know, so, you know, I'm a very curious person. I always like finding the answers to everything, and so... That's not really a complaint of the movie now that I think about it. That's just something that's lost to history that we will never know.
Mm-hmm.
I did feel the dialogue was a bit expository. It felt almost like historians talking about Van Gogh than it did feel like the actual people talking about Van Gogh.
I would argue that the person who sort of broke that mold was the innkeeper's daughter in France, just with her manner of speaking.
Yeah, she actually sounded like how a normal person would be talking about the weird artist that lived in their inn for a while. But everyone else felt kind of too much like documentarians.
I feel as though that was sort of the point of it. Like,
I suppose so, but on the other hand, it can be a bit immersion breaking.
It didn't break the immersion for me.
I didn't feel that at all, quite frankly. I suppose that's the reason for that is because, you know, there's going to be a lot of the people in the audience who don't really know too much about, you know, Vincent van Gogh and how he lived and whatnot. They just know of him because of his paintings.
I would maybe argue against that because I feel like a lot of people who would see this movie are art enthusiasts and Van Gogh enthusiasts in particular.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But maybe you could argue with that they knew that maybe there were going to be some people who were dragged to this movie not knowing anything about Van Gogh, but I do think that this film has a very particular niche and a very particular audience.
I wouldn't say dragged. I mean, I'd assume that the whole art style itself would bring people into the movie just based on that alone, because, you know, it's a beautiful dang movie. Even if you looked at the trailers of it, which these two have, you could tell that, wow, this is beautiful, I should go see that.
I mean, like this is very literally a very much of an art house movie, so to say. You know, if the average person is going to go see a movie in theaters, are they going to risk, you know, spending $12 frickin' to see a movie that might be very dreary and awful? Or are they going to hedge their bets and see a movie that I know at least is going to be entertaining?
People do like dark shit.
I would say this was dreary and awful.
No.
I don't... Art housey.
All right, I think I like more focused on people who actually know the craft instead of just a general audience, right?
Not just that, but also just like, those shitty art college movies you see. I've seen too many.
Oh, they're not all bad.
Like Yoko Ono movies?
I've never seen a Yoko Ono movie. And
Don't
I
ever do
want
it.
to.
Your eyes will burn. I tried. I tried. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch this with an open mind. And I was
So
like,
no,
oh!
I'm not surprised that a lot of people haven't seen this movie compared to other movies, but it is kind of saddening because it is a very beautiful movie.
They should watch it, yeah.
It is a great movie.
Alright, so Mitch, you have a lot of notes written down, so
I do.
let's just have you take the podcast in the direction, like, you want to take it, because I could see that you were planning on saying certain things at certain times. So what do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, unlike the Donnie Darko episode, which y'all should watch. Or listen to. I don't
Please
know.
listen to our Donnie Darko episode. Plugging!
But unlike that, I actually did some research. I don't know, I was just on the website for the movie, and there's a lot that went into this movie, surprisingly. So, how about we just go through the characters, and then we go through production and whatnot afterwards?
The characters we could... Yeah, they were as two-dimensional as the paintings.
Aw.
except for like Vincent, really.
I feel as though they were portrayed well.
I feel like that some of them evolved too over the course of the narrative. Armand in particular, like, he was very much set against, I don't want to mail this letter. This has nothing to do with me. Why should I? And then he became more and more obsessed with what happened with Vincent as the movie went along.
I do feel like his arc was a bit abrupt.
I mean, you could tell that he did care for Vincent, but, like, not too much at the beginning. I wouldn't say not too much. It was more as... I don't know, just...
He wasn't as invested as some other people.
I feel like secretly he was, but he didn't want to be seen as invested because of the reputation of Van Gogh.
Yeah, this movie did do a good job of showing just like how nasty our society can be when it comes to the mentally ill.
Oh
Exactly.
my god,
They literally passed around a petition to kick him out of town.
It was awful.
What the actual fuck?
They treated him like garbage, and they definitely mentioned that in the movie.
Speaking of people who are garbage towards the mentally ill, let's talk about the housekeeper.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Louise... I'm not French. I don't know how to speak French, by the way, unless it's cheese. I know that word. Louise Chevalier?
Louise Chevalier.
Yeah. She was a very despicable person.
Should we just label her, like, not the religious hypocrite, but, like, you remember that scene where she's talking to Armand and she's being very bitter about Vincent and very hostile, speaking ill of the dead, and all of a sudden she hears the church bell and she's like, oh, can't keep the Lord waiting. All of a sudden all cheery and sunshiny and smiley.
The unchristian Christian.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good name.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, oh my god. Like, oh, he was evil. Just because he was an odd, fidgety artist who came in and ate a lot of stuff. He was evil.
Evil. And she was always judging people in the background, too. Like, when she wasn't the main character and the main focus of the scene, the animator still had her in the corner with the most judgy, bitchy face. And you gotta give credit to the actress, too, who played her. Like, I've seen her in other stuff like The Queen, and we mentioned this while we were talking, she's in Harry Potter as Narcissa Malfoy. The way she's able to manipulate her face and those eyebrows of hers, you know what she's thinking instantly.
It's good acting.
Well, also give credit to the artist who had to capture that vindictive,
true.
judgmental glare in a Vincent Van Gogh art style.
The artistry was amazing in this, not just in terms of, like, copying Van Gogh's style, but just in terms of capturing everything.
Yes.
Because, here's a little fact. This movie, to make sure that all the artists did well, they did every shot live action first, and then use that as reference material, so that way they can paint stuff accurately, like anatomy.
That's called
facial
rotoscoping.
expression. Yes.
I'm not the biggest fan of rotoscoping, actually.
Over 5 days, approximately 5 days, they spent just live shooting, and I felt they did a great job, just the live actors did in acting. Everybody was great, in my opinion.
That also makes sense, too, when you see the credits at the end of this movie and everyone's dressed up in costume. I was like, oh, okay, that might have been how they did it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like rotoscoping that much, though. I mean, like, one big advantage of animation is that you can do exaggerated stylistic motions that you can't otherwise pull off in live action, and then to constrain it, especially in a heavily stylized movie such as this, by rotoscoping the motions of the people in it.
I don't think they were trying to restrain it. I think they were trying to be as faithful to Van Gogh's art as they possibly could. I mean, if you had a movie about Vincent van Gogh and Vincent van Gogh's styles, and if they exaggerated the movements of the characters, I feel like that would have thrown off the tone of the whole movie. Like, I feel like he wanted to paint people honestly, but he wanted to bring out the beauty of who they were, and also the ugliness and their humanity. I feel like making it more
too lifelike.
Yeah, but making it cartoonish just would not have been the right approach for this movie.
Make it like how Van Gogh actually painted people. But he didn't paint people exactly like that. I mean, like, the appearance was too consistent. Like, you can tell that it was rotoscoped.
Does Van Gogh have, does he have an estate? Did someone set up No, okay, all his work's in the public domain, because I was about to say, if they were, then maybe they just didn't want to get sued by someone or something. I don't know.
I feel as though if they tried to capture the exact essence of Van Gogh, first of all, they couldn't really, because they're not Van Gogh himself. Secondly, it would make this movie less about the actual movie and more about just trying to capture his whole feel.
That's what the whole bloody movie was about. If they just wanted to make a movie about Vincent van Gogh's death, they could have done it live action. There was a reason
There's
why.
A live action movie.
There's a reason why they did it in paint.
Well, yeah, exactly. I just wanted to mention that, by the way. The director of this movie, she was, I believe, one of the painters, or maybe she wasn't one of the painters. I can't recall, but either way, this was her solo idea.
Her baby.
This was her baby. She had this idea because she loved Vincent van Gogh and his art style about making a short film about him. And she was going to do it alone. But then that kind of blew up over time, and she started thinking to herself, wow, this might actually be a full live-action film quality thing. And so she started getting more people. She started, getting more painters and whatnot. And this wasn't her first, directorial, debut. Yeah, she had directed other stuff. One of the things she did was a stereoscopic animation with painting called The Little Postman, where it was a short film. She had done short films before, but this was her first, what's the term, full feature film?
This is the one that really kind of catapulted her into the stratosphere.
Yeah, this is her first, actual movie, and she definitely wanted to capture the essence of Van Gogh with this animation and whatnot.
She did it. She definitely did it.
Mm-hmm. I felt as though if she had focused more on trying to capture Van Gogh's literal, style of drawing people, it wouldn't work with the animation. It wouldn't work with, the film aspect, because Van Gogh was more about not capturing the exact thing that he was drawing.
Well, yeah, and that's why they made this movie in oil paintings.
Yeah.
Then you're agreeing with me that they shouldn't have just completely rotoscoped the people's faces.
No.
But they're trying to emulate Van Gogh, but they're just rotoscoping with the people's faces. That's...
What do you mean by rotoscoping?
Like I just said, they record the faces and then they model them.
No, they didn't.
That's what rotoscoping is.
No. That's what they didn't do. I misunderstood what you meant by rotoscoping. Here's what actually happened. They filmed all this footage, and then they had these stations. I believe they are called, Painting Animation Workstations, or PAWS. What it consisted of was a canvas in front of them, along with paints and whatnot. Above that was a computer screen showing a particular frame. Then they would draw the entire frame. This is the first frame in a shot. I think they're actually called keyframes.
Yeah, I think they are.
Thank you. They would draw the keyframe, and every single time the frame was finished on the canvas, they had a 6K camera take a shot of it twice. It took it twice because, most films are shot in 24 frames per second. 2 of the frames are the same frame. So what they would do next is they would go to the next shot, or the next frame in the shot, and they would see, okay, what moved? So that way they could paint over it and paint accordingly to what particular piece of it moved. And then they would paint that, they'd do the same thing, and then they go to the next frame, and the next frame, and the next frame. Everything was hand-painted.
Mitch, that is the definition of rotoscoping.
What are you talking about?
That's how rotoscoping works. That's how they do it.
faces weren't like digitally put. Is that what?
That's not. It's not digital. Rotoscoping is you study the real life footage and you use that as the outline for your artwork.
Okay, so yeah, we are talking about the same. I thought you meant like
That's rotoscoping.
I thought you meant a digital thing.
But the fact that they very closely followed the faces when they were rotoscoping, that's what I'm bloody talking about.
Okay, I wasn't sure what you were talking about. I thought you meant like a digital thing at first.
Couldn't you argue that that's what artists do every day? They look something that's right in front of them and try to mimic the detail as close as possible?
No.
I just felt that worked in the movie's favor. That's me, though.
Yeah. Alright, what character do we want to talk about next?
There is a little thing about the boatman. Yeah, let's talk about him. What did y'all think of the boatman?
I wasn't sure what to think of him when Armand was telling him, why don't you step in and interfere? And he said, if I stepped in to interfere with every man that came here, I wouldn't have a business.
He's a fucking boatman. He's a poor dude. And he was going to mess with rich folk? This is less like the, you could have stopped them, and more of an example of just a vicious social stratification that was existing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What's the detail you have about the boatman?
Boatman!
Y'all were talking about how the idiot child looked like a hobbit.
He did!
Fucking Bilbo Baggins is rushing through the bulrushes.
Yeah, Peregrine Took.
I'm surprised y'all didn't think about that with the boatman, because he was played by Aidan Turner, a.k.a. Killy in the Hobbit trilogy.
Oh, I didn't watch the Hobbit trilogy.
But that's not a hobbit, that's a dwarf. And not a very good
Oh,
design.
Keely! You mean Keely?
Yeah, not to mention
Keely.
Keely was a very poorly designed dwarf.
Was he?
Yeah.
See, I haven't really watched it myself. I just thought y'all would find that interesting.
Dude.
That is interesting, though.
You saw how Gimli looked in Lord of the Rings, right?
Yep.
Dwarves don't have exact human facial features that in the Lord of the Rings universe. I'm not talking about people with actual dwarfism in real life. Like, Middle-earth dwarves, they don't look exactly human. They have kind of lumpy, ugly, exaggerated features, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Keely just looked like the human actor. He looked like he looked like some, like, teenager's imaginary boyfriend rather than,
Well, Toriel did have to fall in love with him somehow.
Oh my god.
That's a whole other can of worms we're not gonna go into.
Oh my god.
Oh god. Alright, before Nate blows a gasket, let's switch to someone else. Let's talk about the doctor. What was his name again?
Dr. Gachet.
Dr. Gachet.
AKA Braun from Game of Thrones.
They made him out, I thought, the way that everyone else was talking about him, that he was going to be, and I probably would have been disappointed if this was how the movie chose to handle Dr. Gachet, was if they made him like a snidely whiplash, see, sort of villain. What?
Snidely whiplash, see?
Yeah, what?
Oh my god.
But if they made him just like a mustache twirling...
A card-carrying villain.
Yeah, if they made him a card-carrying villain, then I don't think I would have liked his character as much, because I was ready to hate on this dude. And I still did when he said that he may have inadvertently triggered something in Vincent that may have led him to shoot himself. But he was... Basically, I remember in the movie when they talked about Dr. Gachet is eccentric and then boom, lightning across the sky. If it was going to be that black and white with that character, I probably would not have liked it as much.
Dr. Gachet was a shit doctor.
Mm-hmm.
He was a shit doctor.
Yeah, he wasn't. I think he was more of like a psychiatrist, but not even really.
This is what happens when you live in a society that had terrible understanding of psychology. This was before even Freud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Freud had some crazy ideas, but at least Freud started people on like the more correct track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Freud did enough cocaine to kill a horse.
I feel as though how they portrayed Dr. Gachet was good, because they didn't, yeah, like Juliet mentioned, they didn't portray him as some bad guy who did everything wrong just to fuck with Vincent. Like, he was just a guy. Like, granted, he did awful things.
Oh, I still resented him for what he did.
Yeah, but he wasn't this, like, what'd you say, mustache twirling...
Yeah, see?
Just, psychologist of the year. Bravo.
Bravo.
You made things worse, Dr. Gachet.
Oh.
Bravo.
There's one thing I want to talk about before we get into more of the characters. One of the things I think we still see when mental health is talked about today, even though we have come a long way, it's like, when someone kills himself, there's always, I don't know, but for me, it reminded me of some things that I've heard people say where it's like, oh, but they seemed fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think that still carries over in today, where it's like, you can never see what a person's going through on the inside.
Yeah.
I just thought that's something that's still unfortunately resonant today.
I think the movie did do a good job of capturing the pain, confusion, desperately looking for answers, feeling that people get in the aftermath of a sudden death of someone with mental illness that looks like a suicide. Like, you're constantly looking for answers about that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Speaking of, do y'all guys believe it was suicide, or do you have suspicions? Because there are some, like, different sources and whatnot, like they addressed in the
I
movie.
highly doubt there was very good forensic work done back then to figure out the death of some foreign artist living in, a village in the middle of nowhere, France.
Especially in 1890.
I mean, like, the gut would be a weird place to shoot yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if someone murdered him, like that Renee bastard, I wouldn't have been surprised. I would have been like, okay. But I thought in my head, like when he was talking about the angle of the bullet where it was going, I was like, it was a fleeting thought in my mind, but if it had been planned, I feel like Vincent, like, I was like, he didn't make some sort of apparatus or something to shoot himself, right?
Well, that's the thing.
Because that would have been way too convoluted.
Most of the time, suicides are a spur-of-the-moment compulsory kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, yeah.
So, like, it would have been like he planned this out. It would have much more likely just been like, he was in the middle of like a miniature breakdown that day, and then he had a weapon available, and then he would have grabbed it and, done it. But, like, as pointed out, the angling was very weird. The gut is a weird place to put deliberately shoot yourself in. Maybe he panicked and missed. That's a possibility.
He also probably wasn't thinking clearly in the moment. Like, the dude cut off his ears, so he probably wasn't in the best mental space at that time.
I wouldn't be surprised either way. I wouldn't be surprised if he had deliberately done it, and I also wouldn't have been surprised if somebody had shot him accidentally, and then Van Gogh covered it up because he didn't want the guy to get in trouble.
Remember when you were talking earlier about how the town had a petition to kick him out?
Yeah, what the fuck?
It kind of reminded me like a witch hunt you would see in a movie about the Salem witch trials, or the scene in Beauty and the Beast where Gaston gets a whole mob to kill the beast, or like even in the Frankenstein movies. I'm surprised that they didn't have like an angry village or mob at some point, if that's how hostile these people were feeling in this provincial, French village. Okay, who else do we have on the list?
It's a very small cast.
Yeah, I mean, most of the focus was, on Armand and, of course, Van Gogh himself. There wasn't too many actually, like, big
relevant
people.
characters.
Relevant characters, thank you.
Well, I can think of one.
Is it Marguerite?
Marguerite.
Yeah, yes, Marguerite.
Okay, Saoirse Ronan looks beautiful in paint. She looks gorgeous, and they described her very well when they said she looked almost porcelain.
Really? Her face looked overly plump in oil painting.
I
didn't
say
see that. Okay, so do you think she put too much blame on herself for what happened with Vincent?
Lots of people do that.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Not to mention, once again, social stratification. You're a young woman living in a household in 1800-something France.
Yeah, and your father's a doctor and you fall in love with a painter. That's not gonna go
Or at the very
well.
least become close friends with an eccentric painter. Not gonna end well. You did your best, A for effort.
Plus, she was, like, more than half his age as well.
Well, the real-life Marguerite was actually 13 at the time.
And how old was Vincent?
He was 37 when he died.
I'm trying to think.
He was nearly 3 times her age.
This was like... what time period in the 1800s did he die? Like, what was
90,
the year?
Exactly 1890.
Really?
1890. Okay, so... Were those age gaps still common at that time?
No, not really, no.
Okay, never mind.
Especially not in that place. I mean, like, there were age gaps, but not to that degree.
Okay.
A bloody 13-year-old marrying a...
Reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe with his cousin.
That's a whole different story.
We ain't gonna go into that, yeah.
But, yeah, like, Vincent van Gogh, from what I recall, he was prone to, like, getting a lot of crushes and whatnot, especially with,
the whore he gave his ear to.
Yeah,
And the young girls.
There was also this other other sex worker who he was going out with for a time, who actually reciprocated his feelings, I believe. And
Aww.
for a decent while, her and her child were together for a bit.
Was this a child from another person?
This was the sex worker's child. I forgot her name.
Okay.
Eventually, Vincent van Gogh's brother, Theo van Gogh, convinced him to have him leave her, and eventually he did.
Oh.
It's argued whether or not he he probably regretted that, but it's argued whether or not that he regretted it for the rest of his life.
Oh.
Yeah.
One thing that you know how Marguerite used to bring flowers to his grave every single day.
Mm-hmm.
That reminded me of a story my mom told me about how when Marilyn Monroe died, Joe DiMaggio used to send 24 roses to her grave, I think, like, either every day or every week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
24 roses? No, that's like 24 roses?
24, yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Mr. Mailman.
Mr. Mailman.
Chris O'Dowd!
Joseph Rowland. Rowland?
Let me see.
Rowland.
Spelling? Roland? I don't know. That might be Roland. I don't know.
Joseph, the postman.
Alright. I feel like...
He was a cool dude.
He was a
Yeah.
chill dude.
He had some very advanced thinking for the time period about people who had mental health problems.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
at least in the movie he did. Anyway,
Yeah, true. We don't know whether he felt that way, but he. I
the
don't
way
know.
the way his lips were moving though in the movie, the beard highlighted. It was terrifying, and the beard moved so mesmerizingly as he was like talking and stuff.
That was a hell of a beard.
Yeah. I mean, they had to find actors.
When he was talking about how shameful it was that everyone was signing that petition, I just thought of that joke from the IT crowd where his character is like, "People, what a bunch of bastards."
I do want to mention how Vincent van Gogh did go to, I don't know what they called them at the time, like a
A sanitarium,
sanitarium
an
or
asylum.
Yes.
He went to somewhere. It wasn't as bad as those places, at least not in America, but he eventually did feel better. He did get better in that place. And when he had heard about his brother having a child, also named Vincent van Gogh,
Aww.
Oh.
there was this one painting he made dedicated to the child.
Aww.
I forget the name of it, but it's such a beautifully bright and just distinctive sort of painting compared to the rest of his work. I love it so much. I believe it had a sunflower in it, which is...
He loved sunflowers. He loved painting those.
Oh, he loved sunflowers.
Well, sunflowers are pretty cool.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They're huge.
Have you seen that post on Tumblr where someone's like, I fucking hate sunflowers. Like, this flower is towering over me, thinking it's better than me and it's taller than me. And someone reblogs going, wow, you are not ready to hear about trees.
Yeah, sunflowers, they're tall. They look pretty. They follow the sun. Their seeds taste good.
Oh, let's talk about did we talk about the innkeeper's daughter already?
Let's talk about her. I mean, like, I thought she did well. Obviously, all the actors did well, but she did a very good job in terms of portraying this innkeeper's daughter.
Yeah.
Who didn't barely know him, but who knew a fair amount about Vincent.
She seemed like a very perceptive person who could tell who a person was. Like, I've met people like that. Like, they can meet you for the first time and instantly size you up and know who you are, but she didn't size them up. She
An
just
ocular pat down.
That's an interesting way to put it.
It's from
Mac.
a show.
Oh, no. Oh, man. But she seemed to be innocent and loving, but yet she wasn't a pushover. She had a good mix in her personality. Mitch, anything else you want to touch upon before we talk about your production notes?
Well, I suppose. One thing I want to mention is how when I first saw this movie, I had no idea what to expect. After I had finished it, I realized it was not like a detective movie, but in terms of just, Armand figuring out what happened, everything about Vincent, it was sort of similar to...
A whodunit.
Yeah.
But not really.
A whodunit thing, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's not exactly the same, but it's a fairly decent... It's very close to it from what I can remember from other whodunit
It felt like
films.
very much like a Rashomon kind of story.
What is a Rashomon?
It's based off a movie made by Akira Kurosawa.
Oh, Rashomon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I haven't seen it, but been meaning to. I've heard a lot about it, though.
In the movie, various flashbacks from people's different perspectives that might clash in one way or another. There's everyone's flashbacks about Vincent.
Yeah.
I also loved how they painted that in black and white. Like, when they transitioned to black and white for the first time, I thought, oh.
The black and white scenes were great, because they weren't sure how to portray them at first. Eventually, though, I forget, I think one of the head artists was like, hey, to portray, the past, we should, do them in black and white. But also, let's stray away from the whole Vincent van Gogh style of oil painting, because this is representative of the past. And so it gave...
I wouldn't have minded the rotoscoping of the faces to that extent if it was only in the flashbacks, but, for the whole movie...
I feel as though it would have been a lot more difficult to,
This
not
is already
really
a
show
bloody
difference.
difficult movie.
True, but,
And
even
bloody.
add more difficulty. But I felt as though the flashback scenes were great, and it gave them a lot more distinctive feel by diverting from Vincent van Gogh's style. I appreciated that about that.
Were those done in... those scenes were still done in oil paint, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Every single frame of this movie, approximately 66,960 frames,
Oh, wow.
was all oil on canvas.
Beautiful.
Over approximately 125 painters worked on this film. I believe that's including the head of designs and whatnot.
Head of animation?
Yeah. Oh, the flashback shots were also based on black and white photos from the era as well.
I could see that.
It was an interesting way to portray past and whatnot, because, a lot of people do that. Like we mentioned, I think, what other movie? It was Dead Again. We mentioned in Dead Again how, the past is represented in black and white.
Mm.
Which I felt in Dead Again, I believe I had said in that podcast that it felt a bit but in this movie, I think it did a much better job.
Well, I would argue with Dead Again that it made sense with the time period because that was in the 1940s and, Technicolor hadn't really come into its own yet.
Yeah, but people didn't live in a world of black and white.
No, they didn't. But, I don't know, I thought that was a good style choice in that film and in this.
I mean, I feel as though that's always used to differentiate between the past and the present.
Always, or is it a more recent trend than we think?
Is it?
Most likely.
I mean, I have no idea.
You'd be surprised how young a lot of movie trends are.
That's because the industry's always changing. Alright, any other notes?
One little fact I do have.
Ooh.
I remember listening to one of the videos, or watching one of the videos during the production of this movie, how they had to teach the actor who played Vincent van Gogh to paint like Vincent van Gogh in the scenes.
To make it more realistic?
To make it look more realistic.
Wow.
It was really interesting to see this actor playing Van Gogh, being like, yeah, they had to teach me how to do it. I had to be, all frantic and, also very... very precise and whatnot. And, it was just funny to hear about that. By the way, the actor who played Vincent van Gogh, fantastic in terms of just looking like him and, acting like him.
He had a soothing voice as well that was very nice to listen to.
Well, they had to go through every role and find an actor who looked like the paintings because, as you saw in the end credits, they based every character around the portraits that Van Gogh did of them. And almost every single setting that there was in the movie was also a part of Vincent van Gogh's painting.
Oh yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Like especially how the forensic doctor who was all about the bullet, that was an odd entry wound. How he was holding his head in his hands just like the freaking painting.
And it opens with Starry Night too.
Yeah, the boatman out of a freaking painting. Just about every bar scene out of a freaking painting.
Girl at the piano out of the painting.
Specifically the cafe scene at the beginning, the yellow cafe, that was one of the settings. And a little interesting thing there was when they were cutting, frame to frame, when they were showing Armand's face and then they were showing Joseph's, they had to figure out, okay, what does this cafe look like looking away from it? Because they had only seen it looking at it. They had to...
Oh, wow.
They had to think a lot about that kind of stuff during this movie.
That must have been intimidating as hell, trying to replicate, the other half of a scene that Van Gogh himself painted.
Not only just replicating, but they had to interpret what the hell it would look like at all.
Shit.
One of the settings, I believe it was at the end. Yeah, it was at the end when Armand was in the haystack, or the hay barrel. What is it called?
The wagon?
The wagon, thank you. When Armand was in the hay wagon, and he was reading one of Vincent van Gogh's letters. The scene with the red field and all the farmers putting their seeds down, that was a painting that Vincent van Gogh had done, and that was also the only painting Vincent van Gogh had ever sold.
Aww.
That painting?
That one.
That was the one he managed to sell?
Oh, it was good.
It wasn't Starry Night?
It was not anything.
Yeah, as I was about to say, it ain't no Starry Night.
Well, the only reason it was bought was from his other painter friends.
Oh, that's sad. That's so sad.
How much of this is that he is an unappreciated genius, And how much of it is just like his brother was shit at selling these paintings?
Oh, his brother didn't sell these paintings. No,
His brother was an art dealer, wasn't he?
No,
No.
he gave Vincent the money to buy stuff for the paints and the easels and everything.
Well, then somebody was shit at selling these paintings.
Pierre Tanguy.
Damn
Yeah.
you, Pierre!
He was a chill guy.
I thought Pierre was the guy who bought the painting.
He was the paint seller, remember? He was the one
Yeah.
who told Armand about Theo.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, he tried to sell paintings from Van Gogh, but, not everybody wants to buy them.
That's always so sad. It's like there are all these artists who who just slave away at their work with their life, pull their whole heart and soul into it, and then they only become famous posthumously.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It really does.
And your last, any more anecdotes, or?
One thing you mentioned a lot was crows.
Yeah, there was one famous painting of crows. Like, I know they also did, like, a live-action movie about Vincent van Gogh where they show him frantically painting, like, this murder of crows on the canvas.
Good job using the proper nomenclature.
You know what the owls are called?
A parliament.
Yep.
Oh,
That's always
that's
cool.
interesting.
And a group of slugs is called a cornucopia.
Really? That's why it's called a
of
cornucopia.
slugs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And what do you call a group of humans?
Duh.
An infestation.
Ah.
I got that joke from something else.
Yeah.
I do like what I'd like to think is crow's eggs or some sort of bird egg at the beginning of or not the beginning, at the
The flashback when he's playing with the eggs as a kid?
Yeah. Like, I appreciate they had that in there because it did show his fascination with, like, nature and whatnot.
You know something? When he was sitting, when he was painting, and he saw the crow eating his sandwich, and the boatman said, "That's when I knew how lonely he was, that he didn't even mind a crow pecking at his food." That was also really sad. It was sad, but thinking about it now, I'm like...
Crows are awesome.
Oh no, they're
great.
interesting. But, I thought, it kind of gave me, thinking about it now, like a Disney princess vibe, like the twittering birds that surround you everywhere.
Oh.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate how they focused on Vincent van Gogh's family life, especially when growing up. Like, it did show...
The glaring dad. Oh, God.
It showed what made him the way he was in a sort of way, unfortunately. Like, that definitely did not help his, mental health at all. It probably just developed some of his stuff as well.
Yeah, I bet Vincent van Gogh would have been quite different if he had grown up, in
a loving family.
the 1900s instead of the 1800s.
Oh, yeah. Would have been completely different. There are some people who say he might have had other mental disorders as well.
Like what?
Well, his mental disorders are quite vague.
Based on
They probably misdiagnosed him like crazy.
Based on all the letters and writings that Theo's wife had, gotten and published eventually. Some people say he might have had schizophrenia, which I kind of understand. Some people say he might have been autistic based on the way he acted as a child.
Honestly, I mean, like, I want to be super duper surprised if that was
I wouldn't either, honestly.
I wouldn't be either. Obviously, he had more than depression, I believe, but he definitely had some issues, unfortunately.
Would you argue that, like, he was not cursed from birth, but, like, having his mother name him after her stillborn baby probably didn't help either?
Oh, God, no, yeah.
Oh, that was pretty...
That was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, like, he wanted to be the son his mother always wanted, and like, that baby was on the planet for not very long.
For no amount of time.
Yeah. One little funny thing I want to bring up was, did you guys ever watch Baby Einstein as kids?
No, I was forbidden from watching that show.
Okay, well...
Why?
They just said it was garbage.
Well...
And it actually didn't help with making it smarter.
Well, I had the VHS tapes when I was a kid, and as my dad described it, I'm horrified, but I cannot look away. But one of the things they did was they did a video about art, and they had like Vincent van Gogh. It was this little blue goat puppet, and he had a Band-Aid on his ear.
Oh.
What?
And this was a show for little kids?
Yeah, I remember seeing him. He had like this easel in his mouth, and he was not an easel, like a little painter's
A palette.
Yeah, he had a palette in his mouth, and he was splotched with all sorts of paint.
I don't really like that.
Paint or blood?
Paint! It was paint!
God.
It was yellow and red and green!
I'm glad they actually
Who knows what
touched on
goat
that
blood
in the
looks like?
movie. Like,
He's not a Vulcan.
What?
Who knows what goat blood looks like?
He's not a Vulcan where his blood is green.
I'm glad they touched
Or a
upon the
Klingon
whole,
where
like,
blood is pink.
Their blood's pink?
Yeah, didn't you know Klingons have pink blood?
No.
In Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, that was a major plot point where
Oh, I didn't see that one.
a seeming Klingon assassin is shot and red comes out, and then, like, you know, Worf's grandfather, also named Worf, who was Kirk's lawyer during this whole thing, is like, wait a minute, Klingon blood is pink. And they discover it was a human disguised as a Klingon. But this is a complete digression. Let's
Yes!
go back to what we were saying
Lost
earlier.
train of thought.
You were criticizing the joke about the ear.
Yeah, because I fucking hate that about the fact that Van Gogh is famous for two things. His paintings and the fact that he cut off his own ear, which I fucking despise because, yeah, talk about it, but don't fucking make it a joke because that's a fucking sure sign that he was not mentally stable.
Yeah, Van Gogh gets more shit for cutting off his ear than, like, Picasso gets for his mistresses, or, like...
His treatment of women.
Or what was that famous painter who was a virulent anti-Semite?
I have no
I don't
idea.
know.
There are some artists who were genuine pieces of shit, and yet they get less flack for outright, you know, domestic abuse and awful views than Vincent Van Gogh gets for cutting off his ear in a moment of, you know, mental breakdown.
Yeah.
That sounds like my dad's not Van Gogh, but my dad's belief the all geniuses are assholes theory, where in order to be a genius you have to be completely fucked up, which I disagree with vehemently.
Yeah, Van Gogh might have been mentally ill, but he seemed very friendly from...
He seemed like a sweet guy.
He seems like a stand-up guy.
Yeah.
And he seemed like, you know, everyone he interacted with, that he interacted well with, everyone liked him.
Quite a few brilliant people can be nice people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that intelligence has less impact than we like to think on whether or not we are an asshole or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, being smart doesn't keep you from being a shitbag.
Yeah.
No, there's no excuse for being a shitbag.
Yeah.
One thing that it reminded me of, this other, my other belief that my dad has where it's like, it ain't bragging if you done it. That's still no excuse for bragging. Like, there's a scene in Amadeus where Mozart says, you know, I'm the best composer in all Vienna, and his bosses are saying, well, yeah, but a little humility might suit you better if you ever want to get hired for anything.
Yeah. Just don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
That's all you need to
Yeah,
know.
there you go.
In my opinion, just to be a good person, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be strong, you don't have to be anything, just don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Just be nice.
And don't screw people over intentionally, because then you're the worst dick of them all.
Exactly.
Anything else?
I suppose the last thing I have to mention is at the end credits. I want to talk about that. Did y'all like the end credits?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
really cool and whatnot. Like, you could see all the portraits that Van Gogh had made of all the people in his life.
And the photographs of what they look like, too, in the cases that there were any.
I loved that. I loved the comparison about that, because you could see how hard they tried to get, like, these actors to look exactly like the characters they're supposed to be playing.
Yeah.
And one thing I really liked at the end credits, I didn't even realize this when I had first seen it, I liked the fact that they're playing a song called Starry, Starry Night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed
that was a
that.
good touch.
Yeah, about Vincent van Gogh.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that at the first viewing, and when I had heard it at the end of the movie now, I was silently losing my mind. I just found it to be an awesome choice for them to do.
There's one question I want to ask you both, and it's a hypothetical, but I think it would be interesting to explore. If Van Gogh saw this movie, what do you think he'd think of it?
He'd probably be freaking out over the fact that they're moving pictures.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
He also might be pissed that someone's trying to imitate his work. But, yeah, I don't know.
Well, do you think he would have been flattered that someone actually cared about his work?
I feel he might have been.
He would have been flattered if one person gave a shit about his work, and also he has hundreds of people working, you know, for over for how long were they working on this?
6 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would be super flattered, even if they were imitating me, if someone made, you know, if 125 people spent 6 years making a movie dedicated to my life.
Oh, it was more
my-
than 125 people. Like, there was, like, a bunch of, like, executive producers. There was
6 years.
Yeah, like
The,
they made this in Poland and England and France, right? It's like spanned 3 countries.
I believe, yeah, it was like a bunch, I don't know all the exact countries, but it was a lot of them. Or
Bardzo dobre.
it was some decent places.
Yeah.
They made sure to get some awesome people. Like, the composer was super famous. The cinematographer had also done Fantastic Mr. Fox and Paranorman.
Oh, for Wes Anderson.
No, that Wes Anderson's the
No.
director.
He was the director of Fantastic Mr. Fox.
No, we're talking about the cinematographer.
Yeah, I know you are. I'm just saying that Wes Anderson directed Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh, yes.
Speaking of Wes Anderson, you two need to see Isle of Dogs.
I know,
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to see that
I saw the
Yoko's in that.
DVD. I saw the DVD for that when I was looking for this movie, which I couldn't find the DVD for this movie from like 3 different stores.
And I have no idea where my dad hid our copy. No idea.
I
None.
was upset, to say the least, because it's a good movie. Like, even if people don't think it's a good movie, one could at least say it's an interesting movie.
Yes.
Just for the fact that they spent so much time, effort, money, and just willpower going through 6 years in this movie just to do it.
And the fact that they didn't quit. The fact that they didn't throw it out, that they kept going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's about it for me.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
You go first.
Alright. This is a movie that is definitely made for a certain market of people. It is made for art lovers, for animation lovers, and people who admire the work of Vincent van Gogh. But I would argue that everyone should see this movie just so they could see how much of a passion project that this was, and watching this movie will make you want to look back at Vincent van Gogh's art. It's just, I admire the people who made this movie so much, and definitely watch it if you can. Definitely.
I feel it was a adequate story with okay characters that ultimately managed to capture the feelings of loss and confusion, questioning that comes after, in the wake of a man's death who was mentally ill, and all the questions that it raises. And it was set to some of the most gorgeous animation I've ever seen, and the work they put into it alone is worthy of praise. Definitely recommend people watch this movie.
Take that, Disney.
All right.
Please don't sue us. Please don't sue us.
Don't mess with the mouse.
Sorry.
All right, so now...
We didn't even go over what we were going to watch next.
Oh, we're
Exactly.
about to.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And I'm scared because Nate laughed evilly before we were recording this episode.
Alright, so Nate, what are we going to watch next time?
It's either Alien or it's not.
The movie that we are going to watch for my choice is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh. We're talking about the 87.
Yes,
version.
the 1982 movie, The
I was
Thing.
close.
The one that the teacher at our school had the poster for on his door, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen some videos about it. It seems like a great movie.
Yeah. Oh, you guys are going to love it.
Alright.
All right. Well, thank you as always for tuning into another episode of How Have We Not Seen. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time with Nate's pick.
The Thing.
Have a good night, everyone.
See you on the other side.
Later.
Yeah, being smart doesn't keep you from being a shitbag.
Yeah.
No, there's no excuse for being a shitbag.
Yeah. What's the argument that only smart people are assholes because they only see the whole asshole? I don't know.
They only see the whole asshole.
I'm
That should
cutting
be the
this out.
This should be the motto of our podcast. They only see the whole asshole.
Anything else?
I suppose the only other thing I'd like to mention is the fact that
I smell fried chicken. I can smell the fried chicken cooking wafting down from here. Oh.